Welcome to the bit of the course where we talk about Lightroom. Now, Lightroom for many people was just very overwhelming. There's a lot of information, a lot of windows and tabs and everything going on with it. And I'm here to take all of that stress away and just take you through it step by step. It's really, really simple, and it's a really quick process to be able to use to be able to get photos delivered to your clients, or just to be able to send them to social media to be able to post. So I'm going to take you into Lightroom. We'll take you through all the steps, show you what I actually look for when I edit the photos. And this should help you when we are going out and shooting photos to look for the bits of detail that we're talking about. Obviously, as this course grows and evolves, there'll be a lot more added to it. But so we're just going to jump straight into Lightroom and start looking at what means what and how you can use it. So we're now inside the Lightroom, and this is where we can start to kind of work out where the photos are, what we're going to do with them, how we're going to develop them. So on this left-hand side here, you see we've got the Navigator section, which is the catalogs, the folders, the collections, and everything like that. This is where we find the photos that have been taken from your memory card onto your hard drive, and then we can edit them from there. Now, just as a bit of a rule of thumb here, I always try and get people to take their photos off the memory card and put it onto a little portable hard drive, just so that then you know the images are backed up somewhere safe, just so that you've always got a copy of them. So over on here, you can see that here's some of my other photo shoots, and then this is the one we did recently with Sandy. So here are the images, I've imported them. I've already imported these images, but what you would do is go ahead and you click import. Here, you would then find the images that you want to import, wherever they come from, and then you would just select those images. So let's just say I've got some shots in here. Let's see if I've got something. James Bath, this was another photo shoot that I've done recently. I have already imported these, but what happens here is you've got the all photos ticked, so it will select all of the photos that you've got. Then you've got the tab up here which say copy as DNG, so it will make a DNG copy of them. Obviously, what we're trying to avoid doing is adding too many duplicates of all these images and then filling up hard drive spaces. You can copy them or move them, which means that, say if you have plugged your memory card in and you want to copy them and put them onto your hard drive, you can do it via Lightroom, or you can add them. That just basically means it will keep them in that same folder that you've already got them, let's say on your hard drive, and it just works on that hard drive and edits the photos. So in the middle here, you can see all of the images that you've taken on the shoot, and then on the right hand side here, you've got file handling and apply during import. So these are the little bits where you can add keywords in. It's probably a little bit more advanced at the moment, but this is the section where you can add in a few more bits and pieces. Also, if you have a second hard drive plugged in, you can also save it to a second copy somewhere else, and that can be quite useful if you're trying to make sure everything is backed up. You then hit import and it will just come into this. Now we're in the library bit. This is where you can see all of the images that we've imported. This is the files, and this is where we've got the images from. As you're building this up and you're trying to save certain images to folders, let's say you wanted to make a catalog or a little portfolio of images, you can come over to this left hand side here and add a collection. So what that is basically it's a collection of images that you've told that you want to be put into that folder, that then you can create that they were your 10 best images from 10 individual shoots. You could put them all into a collection in there, and you can name it, say, portfolio, and you can add the photos into that collection and just make sure that then you've got them saved for when you want to export them and put them onto website or social media. You can do it that way. Down the bottom here, you have got all of the images from the shoot. Obviously, when you come up to the develop modules, or when you come to see them in the full screen, this is where you can then see that, like, the film strip of all of these and go, oh, right, I want to edit this one, I want to edit that one. Obviously, all of these are the images that we've taken and imported. Generally with this, I don't tend to do too much with the quick develop sections. You can go in and apply some kind of looks and presets if you really wanted to. You may have like a certain style of image that you want to apply to your images. Quite often there's influencers out there that sell these big kind of preset packs, and obviously some of them can be brilliant. I personally just try and make my own image and my style of image. I don't try and put too many warps and tweaks on them to just make them look slightly different. I want them to look as natural as possible. Here you can apply things like keywords if you're looking to add them onto like a website. You might want to start putting in keywords like model, let's say for me, like the photography coach. Then when I put them online, if someone types in the photography coach into Google, it will see these keywords and it'll go, oh, this is related to that, and it will start bringing the images further up your search in Google. So that can be quite helpful. As you get more involved with all of this, it might be a bit too soon for some people. What we're now going to do is we're going to want to start working on some of these images and actually playing around with it a little bit more. So we're going to head over to the develop section, which is up the top up here. In here, we have now got on the left hand side, we've then got presets. So once again, if you wanted to add a certain look to all of these, you can see that it applies it straight a look over the top of it, so you can see what it would look like. We're not going to be doing that today, but if you have got any presets loaded in, you can put them in on down there. These are some that I did actually get a long time ago and just different looks, but I never used them, so pretty much a waste of money. History is quite an important bit. This is where once you've made a few adjustments to the image, this is where you'd look to then, if you made an incorrect like movement or you wanted to adjust something, you can go back into your history and then go back down. Once you've made a few alterations, let's just see if I just move these around just a little bit. This isn't me doing this perfectly, I'm just trying to show you. You can then see it's then done those little strokes with the history. You might say, actually I preferred it without the black and the white clip-ins on. You could go back and adjust them, or you can just click back to this and that will take you back to that section. So it's all about kind of bringing up that history of all of the different adjustments you've made within that image to make it look that way. Obviously we've still got the film strip down the bottom, so we can click along and we go, actually I prefer this image or this image, for example. You've got this bit in here which is worth looking at. This is the before and after. So once you've made some adjustment, just going to literally pull some of these things around for the sake of just doing some bits with it. You can then see what you've done with the before and after. Obviously that isn't right, I was just showing you as an example. We can just reset that straight away back to that. Quite handy to have that before and after, and you can change the way it looks side by side and so on. But it's actually really quite handy just to see once you've adjusted the image, have you overdone it, have you done something that's not right with it. Again, we've got the histogram, and now we can see this is the area of the blacks, the shadows, the exposure or the kind of mid-tones, the highlights, and then the whites. So as you can see with this shot, even though it looks really well exposed and she looks, you know, the lighting on Sandy looks really good, so we can actually drag this around a little bit and make the image a little bit brighter and pull that information up if we want to. That's obviously just personal preference of what you want to do with this. You can see if I pull this around, it's going to generally just juggle the whole image around and start to change the look of it, and you'll notice down here that this is where the little bits of adjustments are coming in, and it's going, oh, right now we've adjusted the exposure a little bit because we've grabbed the middle bit in here. If I go to the blacks and pull these right up, you can now see down here on the right hand side, we've lifted the blacks all the way up to 100. So we've lifted all of the blacks and made the black a lighter version of black. What you are doing here is by adjusting these things is you're just picking in little areas of the photos and you're selecting, saying, right, in the shadows, and there'll be a range of information that's in the shadows. This is what I want to do, brighten it or darken it. So we can now see, like, this is the settings that we've shot the image at. So it's 100 ISO, we're at 35mm f4.5 at 2500th of a second. Sometimes that can be quite interesting if you've got the wrong setting on your camera. For example, I had a coaching client of mine who kept having his ISO really high and shooting at an aperture of like f9, f11 and couldn't quite work out what was going on. And his camera was auto adjusting the ISO to bring the ISO right up so he'd get the exposure. So it was only when I looked at his Lightroom and I could see that, wow, like his ISO settings were like sky high, and that was why he was getting so much noise and grain in the images, that we needed to adjust the settings when he was actually out shooting. Now he's learnt that, he's taken far better photos, and he's realizing that just the errors of what he had made. In here we've then got the crop, so if you want to adjust how you've cropped the image, or let's say like you want to rotate it slightly just to correct it, that's all in there. We've then got the spot removal tool, so if you wanted to say remove a spot, let's just say we clicked on here, as you can see it's now picked out Sandy's arm. That's quite a useful tool if you're going in and picking out a bit more information. You can see, just going back up to this top left bit, this is where you can actually like zoom into a bit more of the image to have a closer look. So if we look up on here on the image, we can see that there's a few little like kind of spots on Sandy. I'm using the bracket key here, the left bracket key, to make this brush smaller. We can then click on here, let's say for example, and just move that over there. There might be a few other little tiny spots that we want to get rid of. Now you can go and you can see that it's cleaned it up quite quickly and it's quite efficient. In here we have got red eye correction. To be fair, I haven't actually used that a hell of a lot because I've never really had the problem with it. So let's just say that you had a very like say dark foreground and a very bright background. What you can then do is actually bring over this gradiated filter, and then what happens with that is you can then select that, let's say we wanted to brighten this part of the image up. So now you can see that we've brightened the feet of Sandy. We don't necessarily want to do that, but it's obviously just showing you that this then just brings that gradation in across there, and then it just pans it up nice and smoothly. So when we come onto this light area here and then leave it alone, you can see this is the area that it's affecting. So it can be quite good if you're doing a little bit more landscape stuff, or you are trying to just kind of correct where you've shot across a slightly bigger like perspective and you want to kind of just correct the lighting. Then we move over and we've got the radial filter. So this is pretty much a similar type of thing where you can do this type of effect and then you can apply it on here. So as you can see, like we've then just brought the areas outside of that filter down, or we've done the opposite where we've brightened it up here. There's two ways of kind of targeting like areas within the photo. To be completely honest, I don't use them a hell of a lot. They are there just in case you wanted to create something that's a little bit artistic and a bit different, or potentially just kind of correct a brighten a certain area in the image. Then you've got the brush tool. The brush can be really useful, especially if you're going in and you may want to brighten up some of the areas where like the muscles look brighter, so then you get a bit more separation or a bit more contrast in the image. Or potentially if you're doing like beauty type stuff, you might want to make their face look a little bit thinner by brightening some areas and then darkening some areas down, so it makes their face look thinner. It's a technique called dodge and burn on, which you'll see in these tabs here. So you've got a brush stroke here, burn here, which is darken, or dodge here, which is lighten. So you can come in and using this brush we can then just lighten into certain areas. I'm just doing this on a larger scale just because I want to go through all of this and then we'll come back to it. And once you've made those adjustments, then you can see it on that brush, but that's just what the brush does. You can go in and you can have all sorts of adjustments, whether you want the clarity to be sky high and the whites to be sky high. So when I do this, it's going to bring out all of the information on Sandy. It's really going to ramp that clarity up, and you can see that brush now just affects those certain areas. The brush is quite a useful tool and I generally do use it quite a lot. You can do all sorts of bits of changes in here, whether it's sharpness, blacks, the whites, the highlights. You can just affect certain areas in the shots, so you make sure that you're just adjusting the bits of the shot that you want. We've also got the brush sizes down here, which obviously you saw me using the bracket keys for, or you can come over here and make it larger or smaller. The feather is just how much of that, when you make that adjustment, how much it kind of pushes out over the rest of the pixels on that image. What tends to happen is that when you try and apply an effect, you sometimes want to be very precise with it. Let's say you were trying to kind of go around the edge of someone's arm. You don't really want to add too much extra feather to it so that it kind of completely brightens everything up. However, you might be trying to adjust the sky and you want to kind of feather off what you're doing here so you don't just get a very harsh line. Once we've dealt with the brushes, this is when we go into the rest of the image. Here you've got the black and white tab, so if you wanted the image to just look straight away black and white, that can go straight onto that. This is the section where you get down into the white balance. So when you take a photo, you have what's called a white balance. So it tries to find white and it will try and give you the purest version of white. So if we click on here, I can click this part of the image and it's now going to try and give me a white balance based on what part of the area that I've clicked on. Depending on what you're wanting to do here and how you're wanting to do that, you might say that actually this floor looks kind of white, I want to click on that, and that's how I want to adjust it, and it will try and work that out. As you can see, if I click on the green, it's now made it slightly different colors in here and it's just changed the temperature. So this is what the color temperature is. It's the colors which are the blue and the yellow in the shot. So if I drag this all the way down, we'll make it look very blue. If I pull it all the way up, we're going to get a very yellow kind of warm look. That adjustment in here is all registered in what's called kelvins. So this is where like you can adjust the image to then bring out, actually I want it to be a little bit warmer, I want the skin tones to look a bit warmer, or you want it to look a little bit cooler. Depending on what you're doing with the shot, that's where you can play around with that. You also then get the tint, which is to do with like kind of some more of the information of the colors in the shot. I find personally that normally the tint on this, you never really adjust it. It's only on very few occasions where I've had to actually adjust the tint dramatically from what it was, just so that it, just because it's normally very good. It's more just the fact of when you look at the white, you want to then see is that kind of the color that I want. You've also got in here that you can select, and this is where when you shoot in RAW, you can have all of this information in the shot and it'll just adjust those colors. So you can go, actually, if I want to shoot it in a cloudy setting, this is how it would look. If I then went down to tungsten, because I was using tungsten light, this is how I would look. If you hit auto, that's just going to give you automatically what it thinks you should have, or you can have it as you've shot it and caught it in there. This, once again, is all down to personal preference. I don't want you thinking this, I have to do this with every shot. I'm just trying to tell you exactly how you can do these things and what they do. So then you go, oh, actually, if I need it to be warmer, I can adjust the white balance. If I want it to be cooler, I can adjust the white balance. So this is exposure in here. So like we had up here with the histogram earlier, this is where we can go, actually, it's too dark, I need to brighten it, or it's too bright, I need to darken it. And you can actually just look at to what details you also want to bring out. Contrasty images stand out. When they're very soft, if I pull all of the contrast out of the image, it may look nice and soft, but at the same time, it doesn't really give a very good focal point to the image. If I pull the contrast up, okay, we've gone a bit over the top here, but now you get a little bit more contrast, a bit more definition, and your eyes are drawn to something in the image instead of it just being very plain and blank. The highlights, if we controlled those, I can bring them down a little bit and bring a little bit more detail back into the shot because it was a touch on the bright side. The shadows, how are they looking? Do I want to bring a little bit more information into her top and her clothing, or do I want to keep that fairly as it was shot? May just lift that up a little bit just to give it a little bit of a bump. Then the whites, how bright do I want those whites to look? Do I want them to look really bright, or do I want them to look a little bit more like neutered and duller? You know, I personally like to bring my whites up a little bit just to make the images pop. As you can see, it pops quite well here. If we go back to the before and after, you can see we're just adding a nice little pop. Even though we've controlled some of the highlights, we're still bringing out a little bit of that white. This is where then we're dealing with the black in the shot. So how like dark is that black? Is it a very dark black where the blacks are really crushed, or are they very open and you can see it's a lot less kind of darker version of black. It all depends on what clothing they're wearing, what type of lighting there is, the skin tones, all of that type of stuff. This is, once again, it's all personal preference. This isn't saying that every shot you need to edit this to -41 + 8. It's all got to be down to personal preference. Then we've got the presence, which is more of like the kind of details in the shot. So if I actually zoom in on this shot here, what we can see is if I pull the texture right down, it smooths everything off, but it does a pretty harsh job of it. And some people say, wow, look at all the skin in there, and when you zoom out you think, oh, actually that looks great, but actually when you zoom into it you can see that you just look like a kind of waxwork. It doesn't really work. However, you can pull this down a little bit to then smooth up some of the skin tones, and you can do a little bit of that, and it's kind of quite a quick manipulation with that. Instead of having to go in and take out all of the blemishes, you can just give it a little bit of that. Where Sandy's got like makeup on here, moving off some of that detail, some of that texture on the skin. Then we've got the clarity. This is where, like, if your image is slightly soft, or you're wanting to make your image a bit more bolder, you may pull the clarity up to then actually add a little bit more definition. However, what you are going to do is bring out a lot of detail in like the skin texture on the face. So you can see if I really pull that out, it makes Sandy look a lot harsher than it does when she's back down here. Once again, I can pull that right down and take all of the detail out of the shot. This is just about finding a happy balance where you get good details and stuff like the eyes and the face, but you also get nice like soft skin tones that then suddenly work well for your model. Dehaze can be if you have like a very hazy situation, you can actually bring that detail back out, and it will kind of make the adjustments to add some more contrast into the shot or not. And then we can come down to the colors. I'm going to zoom back out on this. So this is the vibrance. So this is how vibrant the colors are. So we can pull that right up, and you see the blue in the background really starting to pop, and also a little bit of the green on the leggings starting to pull here. The saturation is just how like strong those colors are. If we put it right up here, you can see it's going to push all those colors to the very end of what the kind of color spectrum is of that color. So you can see now we've made Sandy look very golden, which doesn't look great. Or we can take it all the way out, and that will give you a black and white version of an image. So already, like, we've made a few improvements to the image just by going through and just moving a few little bits. Tone curve is where you can then add a little bit more contrast into the shot, or you can make things pop a little bit more. Fairly similar to the histogram here, you can see the spikes. What we're looking at here is, can we make this white area up the top here pop a little bit more, and then potentially bring this back down so the darker areas a little bit darker. Once again, if we go back to our before and after, you can see what it's just done to the image. It's quite a bit of a pickup on that, and you can just make those little adjustments to then just finally make this image pop. You have also got in here that if you wanted to control a bit more of the colours, so you may go into the reds in here and go, actually I want to bring those down a bit, or I want to bring those up a little bit more. So you can add a little bit more red into the image, but you can also go into the blues. Let's just say, actually I want to brighten these blues up. And as you can see, we're just affecting the whole image and all of the blues inside of that. There is also some like kind of pre-made preset where you can actually click on this, and this will give you, if we go back up to here, we can see it's given us like a medium contrast here. If we go back to linear, it just gives us what it was before, or you've got a strong contrast where it really kind of adds a lot of darkness into the shot, and potentially like obviously crushes a bit of the highlights as well. It does give it a little bit of a pop, but not drastically. Anyway, I want to go back to the linear one because that's closer to where I was happy with the shot. The HSL and color bit is also quite an important area. This is where you can really tweak the colors of the shot if you're not quite happy with them. For example, with the hue here, we haven't got much red in the shot, but I know Sandy's going to come somewhere between the orange and the yellows. So if I pull this around, you'll see Sandy's skin tone starting to change from like an orange into a red, or if I bring this up here, it kind of takes it to like yellowish greenish type colors. But if you're very subtle with the images, you can actually just add in a little bit more color, so we can make that orange color maybe just a tiny bit kind of darker orange. Yellows, can we see like this is actually affecting her hair? We can see there it makes it look a little bit more like kind of brighter yellow, almost to a green, and this kind of just softens that yellow back more to an orangey type color. See with the greens here, it's only actually really affecting a sign in the back of it. It's not actually picking up the detail on here, which probably means it's somewhere in the blues a little bit more. And now as you see, as I change that, her leggings are popping a little bit more. But you've also noticed that the background color isn't drastically changing because it's not really in that aqua, but it is actually picking some of the detail out in there. The blue, this is where we can see a massive colour change here. We can even see Sandy's shadow here is purple, the background's all purple. It's really made quite a big tweak to it, so we can see there's a lot of information in that blue section there. We can then go into the saturation of these colours, and that depends on whether we make this orange colour. So obviously that kind of dulls the colour right down, and then this is actually like really making that colour vibrant. So this is where we can make quite a few little adjustments in here. We might go, actually, I want to just add a little bit more warmth to her skin tones. And the blues, what do I want to do with them? Do I want to lighten it up, make it look a little bit less harsh? Potentially, that looks like a little bit more of a more balanced image. Or do I really want to pop those and make those blues really stand out? Then we've got the luminance, which is once again adding the light into these areas. So we've taken all of the light out of the orange here. We've added it all the way in here. So you can see just how much of the image you can affect by playing around with the color section. Split toning is where you can target certain areas of the image. Sandy here is in the highlights. I want to add a little bit more of an orangey yellow vibe to her. You may then go into the split toning and go into the highlight and then add the saturation in. And as you can see in that area, we've added like a reddish kind of tint to it. If I move this around, you can see all of the different colors that it's going to put into that area. So you can see this area is down here, all this in here, and on Sandy's skin is now in this highlight section. That's the area that we're selecting. If I then go into the shadows and let's say add it down to say blue, we can bring that in and now you can see all the shaded areas now change into blue. If I ramp that up to like an orange kind of color, you can see now that that's what saturation, with the saturation right up, we've now changed the colors on it quite a lot to show you that you can target that a little bit more. So if we were going with this shot and trying to make Sandy a little bit warmer and then making the background a little bit cooler just to add a little bit more pop to Sandy, that's where we would look to then just add a little bit more of like a warmer color into the highlights and add a bit of saturation to that. And then we go down into the shadows, find out like a cooler color and add a little bit more into that. And now you can see that we're slowly just bringing Sandy out of the shot a little bit more. You can use this technique quite effectively. In this image it may not work just as well, just purely because Sandy is a warmer colour and the background's already quite a cooler colour, even though it's quite vibrant. But you can see there is a little bit of a difference there, that we've just made a tweak and we've just kind of put a bit more red into some of Sandy's face, and I actually quite like what we've done here. Now we're going to the detail part. This is where you can add a bit more sharpening. Let's say your image is a little bit soft, you can pull up that sharpening a little bit more. When you actually zoom into the face, you'll see that the sharpening has actually added a lot more detail into Sandy's face. This has pulled a little bit of that out. Sometimes if your image isn't 100% sharp, when you are using kit lenses and stuff at a slightly further away distance, they're not always going to be pin sharp. But as you can see, we've got a fairly good amount of detail on Sandy's face here. The radius and the detail is all about like how much of that area is been affected by the actual transformations you've made. As you can see here, the detail's really being pulled out. When I pull it back, it's actually being pulled out of the skin. And you can actually apply masking to this, which basically looks at the areas that have got contrast and adds more of the sharpening to that area and then less to the actual bits where there's like a bit more like skin. And you can pull the masking up a bit and it takes any sharpening off of the face and like the skin and just applies it mainly on the eyes and the areas of detail where you're actually wanting to improve it and make it look sharper. The last thing you want to do is add lots of sharpness to an area that you don't want to sharpen up. Noise reduction is where if you've shot at a very, very high ISO, you can bring up the noise reduction and it will bring back some of the detail that's in the shot and it'll try and repair it. This shot was shot at 100 ISO. There is literally no noise in this image, so we can't do anything with it. Sliders hand here for the color, which obviously if we had a little bit more noise, we can bring that and play with that adjustment. But as you can see, none of this lot's been affected by any of it because we have none. Then we get down to the lens correction. Part of me thinks that this tab should actually be a lot higher up on this. So this is where you can go in and remove chromatic aberration, which basically is when you shoot with lots of color and lots of light, or like if you're shooting in low light and you're obviously trying to capture as much detail, sometimes you'll find you'll get little areas where it looks like purple or a bit green or orange. You can click this remove chromatic aberration and it will do its best to actually remove some of that for you and repair some of that information. It will know what areas of the photo will be adjusted by that and it will do its best to do that. Also then you've got enable profile correction. Now this, you're going to see, it changes the image. It suddenly takes that vignette effect off of it. The reason is because when you take the photo, your camera, depending on what glass you're using, like what lens you've got attached to your camera, gives you a bit more of a barreling effect. However, when we click on enable profile corrections, this is the Canon body that I've used, this is the lens, and this is the profile what I want to go with because that's the lens I've plugged into it. And as you can see now, we actually get a lot more of a natural looking image because when I shoot this, it's naturally just gone darker where the light's gone inside of the lens, so it's gone through the lens and the light's bounced across and it's hit some of the inside of the lens, which is obviously dark, and then added a bit more shade into it. So by clicking that, we're actually removing some of that. And now you can see we've actually got a very nice, clear, natural looking image. However, now we've realized it's actually changed quite a lot of the shot. So this is why it's actually worth doing this quite an early step when you do this process in the future. Obviously, I wanted to run through all of this to explain it all to you. What I would then look to do is that if you've, say, got all of your images down here, once you've selected this, you can hit Command A on a Mac or select all. And then when you could go to this sync bit here, this then makes all of the rest of the images sync to whatever adjustments you've made on that image. So as you can see here, we can literally apply this exact same edit that we've done on this to every single image. However, I know that I've shot quite a lot of the images later on in this photo shoot very different to this image. We wouldn't want to adjust those. So what I'm going to do here is hit check none, and then what we're going to be able to do is come up to the lens profile corrections and lens corrections up here and hit synchronize. And what you'll see is down the bottom, all these images will slowly start to change. Where we've enabled the images, it will suddenly start bringing out all the brightness in them, and it'll start adjusting them because it's actually applying the profile to that look. So when you edit the photos, you know they're looking exactly how they should do. Now, I know that we played around with this image a little bit, you know, not 100% necessarily how I would go fully into detail with this shot. If we look at the image next to it, we can see we've made quite a few changes from what is a very similar pose. We've played around with the colors a little bit more. We've made them pop. Potentially, I'd want to lift some of these shadows now because it looks very dark in this middle bit here compared to how it looked before. So I'd go back up and I'd lift some of these shadows up in here. It just takes a little element of that away and makes the shot look a little bit more natural. And after looking at it again, I'm going to take this split toning back out. And I think actually that works really well and nice as an image. This is transform, where if we were adjusting the image, we wanted to play around with it and actually kind of get the image looking straighter, you can do a lot with that. Then you've got the effects. So if you wanted to add that vignette back in. As a professional, I would honestly say to you, I have never purposely gone out to put a vignette on an image. I'm often taking it out and trying to make the image look as clean and as clear as possible. If you wanted to add grain into your image, you wanted to give it a slightly older look, you can do that. So you can pull the grain up here, and as you'll see, we've added just a natural layer of grain into the image. You might just be looking for a textured effect, or you wanted to try and make the images look a certain way, you can do that. I will never ever do that in my life, unless a client really asks for it. I'd probably still fight against them. You can then also make some color adjustments down here. This is the calibration, so you could look at seeing what kind of colors are in all of here, what do I want to adjust with kind of just the version that we've got it calibrated to here. Do we want to make, you might find that your camera naturally has a very red tint to it, so you might want to come in and pull out some of that detail out or not. I don't want to adjust that, to be honest. With my Canon, both my 1DX and the camera that I've been shooting the tutorials with, I've never had to adjust any of these anyway. That looks pretty much how I like it to look. Realistically, with the rest of this in here, I've never used any one of the tabs, and I'm trying to keep this video a little bit shorter. So let's just say then we've got to this. I'm going to hit Command D, which deselects all of this. So let's now say that I've got to the part with this where I've like finished editing this image. I now want to save the image. We'd now come back up to File and then go to Export. And this is where you can then select how you want it to be saved, where you want it to be saved. So for example, with this is saved into my desktop, but I can go in and say, right, I want it to save into this folder or that folder. You can then put it into its own folder. So you might just say Sandy edited images. You can then once again in here rename the image. So like in here, like I often do this when I do it for my clients, where if they want certain words put onto their images, so when they get put onto their website, it goes onto Google and they get their images found a bit easier. I do that, and there's all sorts of changes you can have, whether it's a custom name or a date and a file number. It just depends on who you're working with and what they need. Obviously video, we're not touching any video with this. This is the file settings where you're looking at, do you want to save it as a JPEG if you're trying to compress it for social media, a PSD if you're looking to be able to maybe edit this in Photoshop or send it to someone else that needs to do more editing with it. Same again with a TIFF. PNG is another type of compression as well as DNG. I personally only really use JPEGs, PSDs. It's just what I kind of stick to. You can also then limit the file size if you wanted to create like a batch of images. You can select all of these images and select them to be limited to a 500 kilobyte size and then save them somewhere. You might want to send all of these images to Sandy to say, hey, which ones do you want to pick? I can then come in here, adjust the image sizing so that then the images are smaller resolution, so the file sizes are a lot smaller, and then you can limit it so that none of them go over 500 kilobytes. So it just basically means that all of the information is taken out of it. With the image resizing, I always typically, when I'm exporting it to be able to send to clients or to put on social media, I just click on the long edge here and put it to 1080, or potentially if I want a little bit more detail out of it in a slightly higher resolution image, I'll go for a 2048 pixels. It's just a number that I've found works for me, and like I've found it work for other people. The resolution here is how many dots per inch you have. So if you had this image printed in front of you, how many dots are put into that image to then create the information. A standard image will have 300 dots per inch, whereas this resolution here is 72. So it just basically brings down some of that information and how many bits of information are in each pixel or each inch of the image, so that then you can once again compress the image down. You may want to sharpen it for the screen or for like certain type of paper, and then you can just hit export and it will do its job up here, and it will put the image where you want it on the desktop. So if I go to my desktop here, you'll now see that I have a Sandy edited images file, and there is the image. So you can see it's actually quite a very easy and useful process to use, and it's very quick. As you can see, if I wanted to, let's say, select all of these images here that are the image that I've edited of Sandy, so if I press Command here on my Mac and just select all of these images, or if you've got the Shift key, you could obviously select a load more from this way. You can then hit Sync and then hit Check All. Now, obviously, if you've made any spot removals, the image will slightly change. So if you apply the spot removal to every single one of them, you'll then realize that, like, let's say that there was like a bird flying through the shot. If you've removed that in one shot, it may not be the same as the other because the bird's moved, or there's like the face has moved or something like that. So it's always worth unticking those and go into doing them separately. But if I hit synchronize, you'll see all of these images here will now pick the same colors. It does it in its random order. But as you can see now, I've impacted all of those images. So if you're looking for a quick way to process a batch lot of images, and you know that you've got pretty much right, and then you want to go back in and go, right, I want to change this, I want to change that. Now, as you can see with this shot, for example, like the exposure in the shot is now a little bit brighter. You might turn and go, actually, now with this shot, this doesn't work. I now need to play around with this a little bit more. Do I need to bring back some of this information in here so it's not so bright to be able to get the exposure right? But it is a very good way of being able to do batch lot of images. And if you've got a very similar image and you've just got lots of them, you can apply that to all of them, and it makes it really easy to use. So that is just a kind of quickish rundown of Lightroom, just explaining a little bit more detail about how it works, what you can do with it, what things manipulate what, and then how you can build out and then export the images out. If you have any questions on this, or you have got stuck, please feel free to get in touch. I will be going through more of this information in the next videos with like how I would specifically look to just target one image and edit that. But hopefully for this one that's helped, and anyway, let's move on to the next video.